But thank you so much, Dr. Marvin Reed, for joining us again and for coming on this morning. I know that you should be happier because you would have already gotten your vaccine.
No, my vaccine is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. Actually, that's when my appointment is.
Oh, because you did say you were going to be at the head of the line, you know?
Yes, man. I'm still at the head of the line.
Okay, I see.
The line has a big head.
Oh, boy. So here we are now. The vaccines are in. What are they for? What will the vaccine fundamentally change?
What we're hoping to do is on the back end primarily. So right now, all the hospitals, for practical purposes, are full. Our death rates are actually going to start to climb because not only would it climb because of the effect of the virus, but because the system itself becomes overwhelmed. And what we're hoping is that if we can get sufficient a number of us vaccinated, that on the back end we will be able to cope much better.
Mm-hmm. But the vaccines, we are told, they will not stop the infection, nor will they stop transmission. Am I wrong?
All right. What we know so far is it will stop serious illnesses. We're not sure if it will actually stop infections, nor are we sure that it will actually stop transmission. The data is looking like it might be able to do some of that, but we're not sure yet. And we probably won't know until the summer of this year when sufficiently or more persons have been vaccinated and we can make some definitive statement on that.
So this is a shot in the dark, no pun intended.
Well, it's a shot in the arm.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Pun intended. Okay.
No, man, it's not in the dark. So especially for us who have to deal with like yesterday, I saw a patient. Turns out, again, it's one of those older folks who ended up having COVID and it's really struggling for life. If we can even prevent those individuals from reaching to that phase of the illness, I think we would have done some good.
Right, but it just the only thing is that because there's so much uncertainty, you don't know if, and when I say you, I just mean the system. We don't know if it's going to stop transmission. We don't know if it's going to stop infection. If we don't know, how can we be so optimistic?
All right, so the course of the illness goes through several phases. Some phases of the illness, it's much easier to get the data to say that it does or it doesn't. So you get an infection. Clearly, you'd have gotten an infection from somebody who has transmitted it to you. You then become sick. Then, if you are unfortunate enough, you become so severely sick that you have to be hospitalized. And if you're unfortunate enough, you die. From our side, it's easier to count because we're always sure when somebody is dead. So it's easier to count on the death part. So it's easier to get data to say, one, you're not hospitalized, and two, that you are survived or dead. So that part of the equation is much easier to get. The other part of the equation is dependent upon a combination of what we call lab work and what happens in the field. So the lab work would indicate to us that it really should result in a decrease in the transmission from person to person. But we can't absolutely be sure on that until, because we test it on lab animals who may not behave necessarily like us and then test you. So we now have to be able to get the data in the field for us to be with some certainty to say that. And that data is coming for. If you recall, almost all the what we call phase 3 trials were completed in the December of last year, which really focused on death and hospitalization. As we move forward, we would be able to get more data that can conclusively state that we have stopped the transmission.
There has been recent reports out of Europe, and we've seen out of Australia, Italy, Denmark, Iceland, Norway, and then this morning, Ireland announced this morning that they're suspending inoculations with a batch of Astra Zeneca vaccine, and they're saying this is due to deaths or to increased risk of blood clots that resulted from pulmonary embolism in one case. In your opinion, is the Astra Zeneca vaccine, this one we have, is this safe, and should we be paying close attention to what's happening in these countries, and particularly against the background that Ireland this morning announced that they too are suspending?
Sure. So let's look at some of the data that is out there about the decisions to suspend or not to suspend the use of this particular vaccine. So the decision was made because in, I think, Denmark, there was about 3 reported cases of individuals who ended up with these blood clots and low platelets. And these were health workers with these conditions as a result, mainly because of the fact that they were vaccinated a couple of days before. Mm-hmm. So they took a decision, and as is typical with Scandinavian countries, once one of the health regulators take a decision, the rest of them will tend to follow until it is that we have completed the investigation. Mm-hmm. The truth is, it's a numbers game. The numbers of persons who have to develop these particular conditions, we can count them on our hands so far. The number of persons who have received the vaccine is in the millions, almost approaching the billion. So the long and short about it is that until we have concluded the sets of investigations which says that we can attribute these events to the vaccine, as far as we're concerned and World Health is concerned, the numbers really don't add up, in the sense that the vast majority, we know what we call the risk of COVID is, what will happen if you get COVID infection. Roughly 2 to 10% of persons will die. So we know that. We know that when you get the vaccine, we expect that some individuals are going to react badly and some individuals are going to react very badly. Mm-hmm. And if in this particular case the numbers of persons who react very badly is very, very low, we will still maintain that it is probably better for you to take the medicine rather than to be exposed to the disease. Mm-hmm. And we see that for almost everything. The most famous example I like to use is cancer drugs. Mm-hmm. Cancer drugs are notoriously toxic in the sense that they cause lots and lots of side effects. But we accept that the outcome of untreated cancer is almost death. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, a lot of people would prefer to go and try their luck with the cancer drug rather than to try their luck.
But that's a false equivalency, though, because the outcome of COVID-19 in Jamaica is not really death.
Well, our numbers are still trending along that number, trending along the typical path for the most countries, which is we have roughly about 500 persons who have now died out of 20-something who have been reportedly infected, which says that roughly about 1% of all persons are dying, which is roughly within keeping of what the global trend is. Some countries are much worse. Some countries are close up to 10%, but it is what it is. Mm-hmm. So, but the long and short of it is that even within, so we have administered the vaccine now, I think probably close to 3,000 persons, and there's none that has actually had any severe side effects. Okay. The most we have had reported so far are relatively minor. Mm-hmm.
We know the background to Astra Zeneca, which is the Oxford University partnering with the British-Swedish company Astra Zeneca, developing they're developing one, is it Chad or X1? Well, that long one, and then AZD122. And what could you say whether we got the AZD1222 or the version made by the Serum Institute of India, the Covishield?
I think we're getting. I'm not sure what we're getting in this batch to be 100% honest. I'm not sure which one the versions we're actually getting, but I do know what we're getting is coming out of India. So I suspect it would be the one that's coming out of the.
Okay, so the one that we have now is what? Do you know?
I think it's the one that's coming out of India.
I'm not 100%
sure.
All right. Okay. Could you check on that for me, please?
Sure.
The vaccine, this one we have, we understand is different from Pfizer and Moderna brands. What are the differences, and how does it bring out the immunity?
Sure. Well, that one is a little easier. so Pfizer and Moderna are. So let's just take a step back. When you have a viral particle, the viral has what we call its genetic component or its blueprint. And then you have a molecule called RNA, which then translates this blueprint to make important chemicals for the virus to survive. So that's a three-step process. You have the blueprint, which is in the genome or the genetic thing. Then you have an mRNA, which translates it, and then you have the proteins of interest. What we have found is that virus, which is a spike, is a protein that can cause a strong immune reaction. And so what we then decided to say, okay, how can we get this done? We can get this done roughly three ways. We can kill the virus itself and then inject that into you. That's the basis of the Chinese vaccine. Or we can get the blueprint itself, package it, and inject that into you. And then you would then read it and make the version that looks like the spike protein so you can get the immune reaction. Or you can actually use the mRNA component. And then what will happen again is that your cells will then make the version for the spike protein so you can create the immune response. So the Astra Zeneca uses the method whereby the packaging is really another virus. We call that an adenovirus as a packaging component. And so when we do that, what will happen is that our bodies will use the genetic makeup that is in that package to make the spike protein so that we can elicit or create an immune response.
Do you know that there's a school of thought out there that the mRNA is not really a vaccine? It shouldn't be called a vaccine because of how it is, because of what it is actually.
Sure.
How do you respond to that?
Well, we define vaccines as any medicine that can elicit or train your immune response to fight against an organism or fight against the product of that organism. And within that broad definition of what vaccines are, it qualifies as a vaccine. Now, the technology that we use to create vaccines will vary. And as I said, this is just one of the newer technologies that we have at our disposal.
In terms of the immunity and how, after you've completed both doses of the vaccine, how long after that will you develop immunity, and how long will it last?
All right, so those are two key questions. The second one, to be fair, we don't know. And I say that
that's a shot in the arm.
I say that it requires us to continue to observe individuals. So far, unless you are part of the trial, in which case you'd have gotten the vaccine in the summer, most of us would have gotten vaccines in about January, the early people. And so at this point in time, it's just 3 months onward. We hope that the immunity would be long-lasting forever. But we really won't know until closer to the end of the year, or as we continue to follow individuals, how long that immunity lasts.
But we know how long. We know how long after you develop the immunity. How long after you take the vaccine?
Yes. So again, that is variable, dependent upon which one of the vaccines you actually get. But most people would say that certainly by at least a week after you've gotten your second dose, you would have been immune. A lot of persons do develop some degree of immunity after the first dose. Again, roughly a week or so after the first dose. But we're more sure, more confident that after the second dose, you are fully immune for that period.
Is it possible that someone who has gotten the vaccine can test positive for COVID-19 after receiving the vaccine?
Short answer is yes.
Why?
So if you look back at the trials, you will see that how we work these things is we give some people the vaccine and then we give some people a dummy shot. And then we look to see how many persons have gotten the infections in the dummy shot group versus those who have gotten in the vaccine group. In the vaccine group, you will find that some people did get the infection, typically before they have gotten full immunity. So that is possible. So what we're saying is that, but even those who got it, meaning they got the infection after being vaccinated, their course was relatively mild. So vaccines, broadly speaking, don't necessarily prevent you from getting the target infection. What vaccines usually do is that if you get the targeted infection, you have a much milder course. Mm-hmm. And that's the basis of almost all the vaccines.
And can you still transmit, if you get it and you have it milder, can you still transmit it to others? Does that mean you still have to wear your mask after you've taken the vaccine? You still have to social distance?
At this point in time, that's our recommendation. Mm-hmm. That even though we're aiming to vaccinate as many persons as possible, at this point in time, we're still insisting that people practice the standard public health measures.
Even people who have got the vaccine.
Even people who have had the vaccine. Now, when we reach situations where a large number of persons have gotten the vaccine, then those individuals, we say you can commingle and do what you wish to do.
Okay. Now, November 23 last year, because we have our notes, Astra Zeneca released their clinical trial data showing that the vaccine combination in which the first dose was half strength was 90% effective at preventing COVID-19 cases. In contrast with the combination of 2 full dose shots, resulting in just 62% efficacy. And we see where researchers are speculating that the lower first dose did a better job mimicking a natural infection in promoting a stronger immune response with the second dose. Now, what is your take on that postulation? And should a person who contracted COVID naturally be vaccinated?
All right, so I'll take the second one first because I'm in the second category.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, you got COVID? All this while you had COVID and you didn't tell me?
I had it. One of those healthcare workers who unfortunately got it.
Well, good to have you with us. You see that it doesn't really kill you?
So the answer to that is yes.
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 Okay.
The short answer is why we haven't promoted the half dose, full dose as the way to go with the AstraZeneca vaccine has to really do with what we call how trials are designed. Mm-hmm. So the trials was actually designed for the 2 full dose, and it wasn't by error, called posterior error, that we actually found out that some of them only had half. Mm-hmm. And so in order for us to make that a standard recommendation, what we'll have to do is that we'll have to redesign the trial, testing it that way, because it may be what we call a fortuitous finding. So until those are finished, we will still have to go with the 2 full dose.
Okay. So you said the short answer to the other part is yes, because you're going to take yours tomorrow morning.
Yes, ma'am.
So is there anyone who should not take the vaccine, the COVID vaccine?
All right. So again, because there are different variations of the COVID vaccine, meaning I'm told we may get some Johnson & Johnson later on and so on. The broad consensus is that individuals who have significant allergic reaction to whatever agent, food or stuff, should really exercise some caution and care and have a discussion with their physician about doing it. At this point, individuals who are under 16 really shouldn't take it because we haven't tested it sufficiently yet on those persons who are under 16. But outside of that, the recommendations are relatively broad that we should. So even those persons who have cancers, we're saying they should. Those persons who have asthma, once they've not had a relatively severe attack recently, they really should be considering taking it. So we're opening it up to encourage as many persons as possible to take it if they wish to take it.
I heard a response watching the last press conference. It might be the last one with the Minister of Health, where a question was asked similar to this, and the response was, if you have allergies to the constituents of the AstraZeneca vaccine, then you probably shouldn't take it. Now, there was no follow-up question to say what are the constituents? What is it made up of?
All right, so the constituents of it are really the adenovirus particle itself, so that's the active component. It also has, it doesn't have any preservative in there, but it also has a little bit of ethanol. It has some sodium solvent in there that we use. The thing that I think most people may react to, there's a chemical in there called I think there's like a polysorbitol or polysorbitol, like a sugar thing that we have had to put in there to make sure that the vaccine stays alive, that they may be allergic to. Mm-hmm. What we're going to be doing is that when you go in for your vaccine, there's like a questionnaire that we ask you to complete. Mm-hmm. And on that, depending on how you respond to that, we will then advise you accordingly whether or not we think you are there's a significant chance of an allergic reaction.
Well, you just mentioned that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, that Jamaica is scheduled to receive some of that?
I think we may be able to get some, yes.
You know that the Catholic Church, there's an arm of the Catholic Church that is saying to persons, do not take it because it has parts from aborted fetuses from 1980s.
Oh, that I'm not aware of.
There's some bishops in the U.S. who are discouraging the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops.
Right.
Along with 6 other dioceses, they're saying to their constituents, do not take it because it has the cells taken in the 1980s from the tissue of aborted fetuses. I'm just putting that out there. So, all right. So, so how does the Johnson & Johnson match up to the Astra Zeneca?
They use basically the same technology, really, which is that as I said before, there are a couple of ways they could do it. So they use the same technology where they get the viral genome and then they package it into another virus, so called a carrier virus. They inject it in as a vaccine. Mm-hmm. The difference between them is really the nature of the carrier virus that they actually use. But the principle behind both of them are roughly the same. Mm-hmm. And the same thing for the Russian vaccine. Mm-hmm. They use the same sort of a technology.
And in terms of the storage, Johnson & Johnson can be stored.
The storage is roughly the same as well because of the technology that you use. They can be stored in regular fridge.
Normal fridge. Our neighbor Cuba, I always bring up Cuba. So our neighbor Cuba, they've been doing great work in bioengineering and immunology. You know that. And they're currently developing at least 4 vaccines against the COVID. One called Soberana 2. Right.
Soberana 2.
Right. Okay, so you know them. So tell us about them, because I was going to ask you what you know and if we're going to be sourcing them and if it's cheaper. And don't you think that would experience far less vaccine hesitancy if it was coming from Cuba?
So I'm not sure about the vaccine hesitance in terms of whether it comes from Cuba or not, but I do know that we have had tremendous cooperation and linkages between Cuba and Jamaica in a wide variety of areas, especially in eyes, ICU care, and so on. So there's that trust between both countries, which has survived many presidents and embargoes.
Yes, true. And that's why I said less hesitancy. Mm-hmm.
What they have actually done, the difference between all the various different vaccine has to do with how you package the active ingredient. So in the case of the Cuban vaccine, they've decided to use a packaging membrane, which comes from a bacteria this time, the meningococcus bacteria. Most of the other persons will use what we call like a phospholipid membrane. And they have taken an important component of the spike protein, which is called the RBD unit. That's a very important component, one of the major parts of it. Yeah. And they package it in this little membrane and inject that in. So the membrane acts as a little stimulant to boost up your immune system. And then you would recognize this important component of the spike protein and create your own antibodies to fight it. But by the basic principles of how it works from the basic biochemistry. What they're now doing is what we call phase 3 trials, which is what you really need to be able to then say whether or not, when you deploy it in the field, whether or not it works. So they're in the middle of that, and as soon as that is ready, we'll then be in a position to see if it works, and so can it get approval.
Mm-hmm. So overall, your feeling, obviously you're going to take it. It means that you have some trust in it. Or you're just telling that you're going to take it, but you're not really taking it.
No, I'm going to take it. I'm fully confident in it.
All right.
The only one, as I've said publicly, everybody who asked me that I would not take is the Pfizer.
Okay. Why wouldn't you take the Pfizer? What?
It's because I have strong allergic tendencies, and of all the vaccines worldwide that have been deployed, that's the one that's been most associated with the strongest allergic reaction. So that's the main reason.
All right. And so by when does Jamaica, do you have this information that when does Jamaica intend to be satisfied? Is Jamaica planning to vaccinate everyone? Or
so the goal is to try to reach the proportion that we presume we can get herd immunity. That numbers vary from countries to countries and malls to malls. We know that somewhere between 60 to 80% should give us that number. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's the goal that we're aiming for.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that there are conversations in every country? I think, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, no, man, go ahead.
No, right.
My dog barking.
Oh, okay. All right, so we hear this discussion about, vaccine passports and so on, because people like myself who have no intention of taking this vaccine, but I'm traveling like crazy. Do you envision that we'll have difficulties traveling?
Yes.
What do you mean by yes?
I think you will have difficulty traveling because I think one of the biggest issues, it even came out to the HIV. So if you recall the HIV model, at one point in time, to get an immigrant visa, you had to convince everybody that you were HIV negative. So I think everybody's afraid of reintroducing infections if they've brought it under control. And so I think in the future, we're going to be asking individuals to demonstrate, which we do, for example, if I'm going to a country that is yellow fever, they want me to
we currently do that. I travel to Africa all the time, and I really do have a yellow fever vaccine passport. So you see, our condition, our situation is really bad. Because if it is that we are going to be forced now to take the COVID-19 vaccine just to travel, say, to the continent of Africa, then, to me, that's really sick. But,
I think what they would also do, apart from showing vaccinations, you may have the other alternative route, which is now you have to show a negative COVID test.
Okay. I hope so.
For individuals who don't have the vaccine, I think most countries will come up to say, if you don't have a vaccine, show me a negative COVID test, but within X period of travel.
All right. Well, let us see where this leads us. Let me know how you feel tomorrow after you've taken yours. You should come back next week and tell us how you feel. All right. Okay. Thanks so much, Dr. Professor Marvin Reed. Appreciate you. All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.